Hey everyone, this is Doug Kenny from Relentless and Unstoppable, and today we have Temple Grandin with us. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
Good to hear. Where are you at the moment?
I'm at home in Fort Collins right now.
Nice. Have you lived there for a while?
32 years.
That's
I've been
really,
a professor of animal science at Colorado State University for 32 years.
that's incredible. What's that job like so far?
Well, I've been teaching a class on basic cattle behavior and handling, which is something that I really enjoy doing because animals are sensory based. They don't think in words. It's what they are, memories or pictures, sounds, smells. They live in a sensory based world. To understand any animal, you need to get away from verbal language.
All right, that sounds pretty cool. It's an interesting culture, isn't it, and industry?
Well, there are some ranchers that do a really good job on, grazing management, and there's a lot of things in the industry that's really improved. I've been involved with the cattle industry now for 50 years. Cattle handling's gotten a whole lot better in the last 15 years or so. So there's a lot of things that's improved.
Good to hear. So, what did you do in your career that was so amazing regarding the cattle industry?
Well, then the first thing I worked on was designing of facilities. I worked on that a lot in the 70s. And I thought I could fix cattle handling strictly with facilities. Good facilities make it easier to handle cattle, but you also have to have people that do low stress, calm handling. Facilities do not replace management. And there are a lot of young people, especially engineering oriented people, which I was, make the mistake of thinking that they can fix everything with equipment. No, you can fix half of the problems with equipment, and the other half is management. You've got to manage stuff and insist that cattle are handled right. And then I've done a lot of work on just teaching people about basic cattle handling principles. And I often get asked about what I'm the most proud of in my career and what I think did the most good. Well, back in 1999, I was hired by McDonald's Corporation to implement a very simple scoring system for evaluating slaughterhouses. And McDonald's had 75 huge big plants on their supplier list. And the scoring system, very straightforward. You measure when you hang it up, everything's got to be dead. If you got to shoot 95%, make them unconscious instantly. And then before that, it was terrible because of broken equipment. No more than 1% falling down, 75% moved, no electric prod, and no more than 3% of the animals mooing in the stunning area. And when we first started, the scores were horrible. But one of the reasons why it worked, it was very simple. The plant, it knew exactly what it had to do. And I emphasized outcomes. And I had a lot of equipment out in the industry that had been out there, some of it for 10 years, 5 years, and a lot of people just tore stuff up and wrecked it because they weren't managing it. And when you've got a big retailer enforcing standards, that really made a difference. Now, Wendy's came in with a really good system, but the scoring was extremely simple. It's like traffic rules. Stop signs mean stop. You can measure speed. You can measure drunk driving. The animal handling parameters you could measure. And I saw more change in that year, 1999, than I'd seen in my whole career. So I've been spending a lot of time working with large buyers because they're in a position to drive really good change. And we even took some of the older plants and we were able to make them work decently without buying all new equipment. Out of 75 plants, only 3 of them had to do really expensive renovations. But a lot of simple things, repairs, non-slip flooring, and changing lighting. Cattle get afraid of shadows on the ground. Stuff that we tend to not notice can really interfere with cattle handling. I might even show you a picture of a thing I call the spider monster. Here's a picture right here, and I can get it bigger. Okay, there it is right there. That's a shadow that appeared on the floor of a cattle handling facility at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They weren't afraid of getting slaughtered. That's a shadow from the overhead structure. I call it the spider monster.
Oh,
And when that appeared, the cattle didn't want to walk over it. Now, the rest of the day, it wasn't there. And by that about stopped the plant, and that shadow would show up like for half an hour or so in the middle of the afternoon. And you get rid of things like that. I call them the distractions. Then the animals will walk right up the chute just fine.
I see what you mean. It did definitely look like a spider.
Well, and this was a picture I took last year. That's actually was in a new plant just starting up, and I went there in the morning. Everything was working absolutely fabulous. And then on 2 o'clock in the afternoon or so, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, couldn't get the cattle to walk over that shadow,
I
and
see what you mean.
it really messed up the handling. And and fixing those kind of little lighting problems can really make a big difference. And
Definitely.
to fix that, you'd have to build a roof over it to get rid of that.
So yeah, you're an inventor too?
Well, I worked on developing a piece of equipment for the meat industry called the center track restrainer system. You can look up a video I have online, Beef Plant Video Tour with Temple Grandin, and see how that works. And for very large plants, that works really well. But one of the reasons why the things I did work is they were simple. They were also targeted. Too often some activists will say, well, the whole industry is just terrible, Well, I picked out improving, stunning, and handling in slaughterhouses. Okay, that's something specific. And I came up with a very simple method to evaluate it. So it was very clear what passed, and they had to get a passing score on all 5 of the variables. And in the beginning, when I collected baseline data, I guess maybe 25% of the plants could have passed it. But we were very quickly able to bring them up to a good standard. 3 plant managers had to be removed. But this is how you get things changed. But you got to have clear standards. I mean, one of the problems, you can't write handle them properly. What does handle cattle properly mean? That's open to too much interpretation.
I see
Now,
what you mean.
they had to
So
make numerical scores. Now, on the stunning first shot efficacy, now a lot of the plants are up to 99% or better, and then they immediately have to reshoot it. Now, some people say, why don't you just make it 100%? Well, the problem is, if they try to go for 100%, they'll hang a live one on the rail. That's an automatic failed audit. They do
I
that.
see what you mean. What was it like growing up as someone on the autism spectrum?
Well, teenage years were the worst. I had a good childhood. I used to like to, do all kinds of outdoor things. This is a book that has Calling All Minds. It's got all my childhood outdoor activities. And I loved tinkering and making things like kites and airplanes and stuff like that. We need to get kids back doing, these sorts of things. Teenage years were horrible of bullying and teasing. And the only place I was not bullied, friends who shared interests. That was riding horses, model rockets, and electronics lab. So it's very important to get these things going. Another kid, it might be band, it might be a choir, it might be an art class or a makerspace or some other robotics club, where they can have friends through a shared interest.
Yeah, I know what you mean. My teen years were really bad as well. It was awful going through high
Teen years, the
school.
worst part of my life. I had somebody write to me. They wanted me to write up a thing about what would I tell my younger self in just like 2 sentences. And I tell my younger self that when teenage years were terrible, but you'll get through it, and the future will be much nicer. That's what I'd tell my teenage self.
That's definitely what happened to me as well, and I'm glad it happened to you.
No, worst part of my life.
I mean, the years afterwards that were really good, that happened to me too, and I'm glad that happened to you as well.
Oh no, I had a terrible time with bullying. It was horrible. I got kicked out of a regular school in 9th grade because a girl called me a retard, and I chucked a big book at her, and I got kicked out of school for that.
Yeah, I've had a similar story like that before. Do you want to hear my story about?
What happened to you?
What happened to me was in first grade, for example, I was living in Estes Park, Colorado at the time, and so what happened was we got a lot of snow, and when I was in first grade, me and my friend Damien, who you saw in that picture a minute ago, we uh, we were having a snowball fight together, and which wasn't allowed under school rules. You know, they don't
Yeah.
allow that, and so I we were having forts and throwing balls of snow at each other, and a teacher named Mrs. Huth came by and she told us to stop doing it. And so when we kept doing it, she tried to separate us. And I did not like being separated from my best friend. So I took one of the balls of snow and threw it in her face. And you can imagine that when I went back to class after recess, my teacher was not impressed with me. And I lost recess the next day, but this is where it gets juicy. The next year, I had Mrs. Huth as my second grade teacher, and so I entered the school just a little bit nervous. And I couldn't even look her in the eyes on the first day of school. And eventually, however, she realized what it was and told me to just move on and that it was in the past. So,
Well, in my elementary years, I didn't get teased because my third grade teacher told the other students I had a disability that wasn't visible like a wheelchair. And so my elementary years were really, really good, but high school was just a nightmare.